The Zephrani Council had been certain. Humans were soft, fragile creatures who crumbled without their technology. Drop one on a frozen moon with nothing but primitive tools, and nature would do what their warships could not. They had chosen Hawley precisely for this reason, a human engineer. Unremarkable, average in every measurable way. If he survived, it would be an anomaly. When he died, it would prove humanity's weakness to the galactic community. Hawley had other plans. The first week nearly killed him. The winds on Keth 7 howled with a voice that sounded like screaming metal, and the temperature plummeted to levels that should have frozen his blood. The Zephrani had given him stone tools, fibrous plants for rope, and deposited him in a valley where ice never melted. But humans, Hawley knew, were the galaxy's most terrifying survivors, not because of their strength, but because of their spite. He built a shelter, first crude, ugly, but functional. Stones piled against a cliff face, gaps stuffed with frozen moss and packed snow. It wouldn't win awards, but it kept the wind's teeth from his flesh. Then came the hardest part, fire. The Zephrani had watched, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with anticipation, as Hawley struck stones together for hours. Their bioluminescent skin pulsed with what might have been laughter. Fire required oxygen-rich atmosphere and combustible material. Keth 7 had both, technically, but the cold made everything brittle and resistant. Halley's hands bled. His fingers went numb. But on the second day, a spark caught. The Zephrani's laughter died. By the third week, Hawley had constructed something that made the observers lean closer to their monitoring screens. Using clay from a frozen riverbed and stones from the valley, he built an oven. Not just any oven, a proper thermal mass structure with a chimney system that drew heat through chambers, maximizing every calorie of warmth from his precious fuel. Impossible, the lead observer, Reuben, whispered. She was the council's finest xenobiologist, with 17 citations on the limitations of primitive species. The thermal calculations alone. He has no instruments, no measurements. Her colleague clicked his mandibles dismissively. Luck, he will starve regardless. There is no food on Keth 7. But Reuben watched more carefully now, her pale blue skin darkening with concern. Hawley knew about the lack of food. The Zephrani had chosen well. Keth 7's ecosystem was minimal, almost sterile. But almost was the gap where humans thrived. He found the lichen first, scraping it from rocks in areas where his oven's heat had created a microclimate. It tasted like frozen dirt and despair, but it was calories. Then came the ice-boring insects, tiny things that most species would dismiss as inedible. Hawley roasted them in his oven until they were crunchy, nutty almost. By week 5, he had lost weight, but he was alive. More than alive, he was adapting. That's when the beast cub appeared. It was a Keth worm, a creature the Zephrani themselves feared, six-legged, covered in crystalline scales that reflected the dim sunlight like fractured diamonds, with a mouth full of ice-breaking teeth. This one was small, maybe the size of a large dog, and it was dying. Hawley found it collapsed outside his shelter, its breathing shallow, ribs visible beneath its scales. Something had happened to its pack. The cub was alone, starving, and the cold was winning. The smart thing, the survival-oriented thing, would be to let it die, or kill it for meat. Hawley carried it inside instead. What is the human doing? Reuben demanded, her skin flashing red with alarm. Keth worms are apex predators. It will kill him the moment it recovers. She watched as Hawley fed the cub his own rations, the roasted insects, the lichen paste, even precious scraps of root vegetable he'd discovered in a thermal vent. The cub was too weak to bite, but it ate, its crystalline eyes watching Hawley with something between fear and confusion. Humans, Reuben was beginning to understand, were not driven purely by survival instinct. The cub, Hawley named it Shard, recovered slowly, and as it did, something unprecedented happened. The creature didn't attack. Instead, it followed Hawley, learning his routines, mimicking his behaviors. When Hawley gathered frozen wood, Shard dragged branches twice its size. When Hawley hunted ice borers, Shard used its claws to break open their frozen colonies. They became a pack of two. By week 10, Reuben's reports had changed from clinical observations to something closer to fascination. The human had transformed the valley. The oven had become a kiln, producing clay pots for storage. The shelter had expanded into a small dwelling with a root cellar dug into the permafrost. Hawley had even created a primitive water collection system, melting ice through a series of channels heated by his constantly burning oven. And Shard had grown. The cub was now the size of a small vehicle, its scales gleaming with health. Utterly devoted to the human who had saved its life, he was meant to break. Reuben said quietly to the council during the quarterly review. This world was meant to prove humanity's fragility. The council chair's translator clicked with irritation. And your assessment, xenobiologist Reuben? She looked at the screen where Hawley sat by his stone oven, Shard curled beside him. Both of them warm and fed in a frozen hell. The human was teaching the beast to retrieve specific tools, using sounds and gestures. They were communicating. My assessment, Reuben said slowly, is that we have made a profound miscalculation. Humans don't break because of hardship. They break when they lose purpose. You gave this one a challenge, a problem to solve, a life to save. She paused, her skin cycling through colors of unease. You didn't break him. You reminded him what his species is capable of. The council chamber fell silent. On Keth 7, Hawley added another stone to his oven, making it more efficient, warmer. Shard rumbled contentedly, a sound like grinding ice that somehow communicated trust. Outside, the winter winds screamed their fury against stone walls that would not yield. The Zephrani had wanted to prove humanity's weakness. Instead, they had documented something far more terrifying, a human, stripped of everything, building civilization from frozen stone and saving a monster because kindness, apparently, was just what humans did, even in hell, especially in hell.